Hello and welcome to Dream It, Dare It, Do It, Live the Life You Want. I'm Jasmine. I'm your host. As usual, I am here. And today I am so happy, guys. I talked to you in the last episode who was coming. It was a teaser, and now she's here. I have Jules Swales. Hi, Jules.
Hi, great to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you're here. I'm happy I finally get to meet the Jules Swales.
Oh my God, now the stakes have risen way too high.
Okay, so to those of you who are listening, the reason why I know of Jules is because a lot of my clients have taken her writing class. So Jules is known for the classes that she does with writing, and you have different levels, right? You have like entry level, and so just tell me a little bit about like why is it that people are in love with your writing style, like your writing classes?
I think that people are in love with themselves through
Mm,
writing. And I think that so I teach Jack Grapes's method writing. So the term method writing is quite generic. So my teacher, who I studied with for decades in LA, Jack Grapes, he took Stanislavski's method acting. He was a method actor, Jack was, and he created with creative genius, because he didn't do it himself, these amazing exercises based on method acting. And I was given permission way before COVID to actually create an online platform to teach his programs because no one was doing it. And unless you lived in LA, really, and you were sort of affiliated with the entertainment industry, because it was really geared towards writers, producers, directors, a lot of people um, in the entertainment industry in LA, which is where I used to live. Um, and and the program has done well. Now, I think, yes, I think I'm a good teacher. I have a strong psych and coaching background, but I think it's more than that. Um, I am very seasoned in these exercises. I've been doing them for over 20 years myself. I'm still practicing them all the time. And what lights me up more than anything is how people get lit up themselves by, if they do the exercise, something transformative will happen. And it's not, the writing will transform, but the human transforms. And so it's such a privilege, really, for me just to sort of hold this space. I'm not pouring knowledge into anybody, what these exercise, I'm just saying I'm very deliberate in keeping people on a narrow journey with the exercise, so they just stay focused on the exercise. And in doing that, there's such a vast freedom of humanness that happens for them on the page. And then there's this, oh my gosh, I hadn't had that memory for years. And oh my gosh, I can't believe I actually just wrote that. Like, it sounds like I know how to write.
mm.
Well, it just sounds like they know how to be a human, is what it sounds like. And most people who pick up a pen and, want to write, they suddenly want to sound like a writer and not sound like a human anymore.
Oh, I love that.
I had this example, Jasmine, just last week. I sent out my newsletter. It had a sort of suicidal lilt to it, so it was a little deeper than some of the others, perhaps. And a friend of mine sent me a voice message, and she just said something absolutely beautiful about how she received the newsletter. I then said to her, and she's done my class. I think she only did the entry level, but maybe she could do a couple more. But um, I then said to her, okay, great. Can I transcribe that and use it just as blurb for marketing? Not that I market very much. And
Yeah.
she said, no, let me write something and send it to you. So she wrote me this much and she sent it to me. And I said to her, okay, as a method writer, now you know why you can't write like you talk. Because what she said, all the nuance and essence of what she shared with me in her voice message was so rich and beautiful. And all that got lost when
In
she
the
suddenly
writing.
wrote something that she thought would be a product or that people might read. So when people do my classes, there's no talk about product or grammar or any of that. It's just do the exercise and have an experience with yourself that's new. Now, who wouldn't want to keep doing that?
Yeah. I love that because I have a girlfriend that is a writer and she's a published writer. She did children books in the education industry, and she's been wanting to write a book for a little while now. Now maybe she's going to be taking your class. Who knows? Uh, but like she has been taking many classes, and it's kind of like, when you go into these classes, like do it this way and do it
Yeah.
that way and do it this way, and this is the form you have to take, and I feel like it's in the way. It actually
Yeah.
gets in the way. Like I've seen it for myself in like I work with businesses, right? And so I'm going to help people do newsletters, for example, right? And then I remember when I first started, it was kind of like I was studying how to do newsletters. And it's like, you got to do it this way and you got to do it that way and you got to do it that way. And then I try to fit into that box and it just didn't work for me, or I'd go to a client and it didn't work for them. And then, and then all of a sudden I just started going with the flow, listen to the client. I think this would be good for you until they get inspired, right? Like I think that people get so much thinking around how it should be done that they get in the way of what is going to be done.
They have a lot of thinking of how it should sound.
Yeah.
A writer doesn't say things like, or do you know what I mean? Or anyway, where was I? You
Yeah.
know, writers don't sound like that on the page, but humans do. When I moved to the UK, I went to the bank to get a new bank account, and the woman said, "Do you want to use your voice as a password?" And I said, "Well, I sound a bit more American now. Once I've been back here for a while, I'm going to sound more English." It doesn't matter. Your voice is like your fingerprint. And I thought, this is what I've been telling my students for decades. There is nobody else on the whole planet that talks the way you do. So write like you talk. Don't write like, the masters. I mean, I'm reading a book on Chekhov right now. It's actually called How to Write Like Chekhov, but I mean, I'm not going to try to write like Chekhov, right?
Yeah.
But the point is, when you go to UCLA in LA and you do, advanced writing classes, you're studying other people, the way other people write. But actually, can you just write like you talk? Because everything all that intimacy and the closeness that you have with somebody when you're having a conversation over coffee, or when someone kind of gets breathless with emotion or something, all that gets lost if you pick up a pen and you're trying to sound like a writer sounds, all eloquent and poised. And so many people come to me and they say, Jules, I have all these great ideas. Everybody tells me I should write a book. But the minute I pick up a pen or start typing, it's like crickets. I don't know what to say. And I'm like, well, if you and I had a coffee and you didn't know what to say, I'd probably call the ambulance as that you were having a stroke or something. If we were to meet, you and I know this because we had a lovely chat before we jumped on here today. There's never a shortage of ourselves as humans, but there's a shortage when we sit in front of the blank page. And I've added some tricks to Jack Grapes's repertoire of how to become more present and how to become just present with our writing and the blank page when we start, and not to be so daunted by that.
Well, I had a conversation with Fiona Jacob. Like just a few episodes prior, I had a conversation with her, and she essentially took your class, right? And then she's in the new book
She's
that
still doing my classes, yeah.
she's still doing. And she told me, she says, Jasmine, I freaked out. Was so dark. It was so dark. It freaked me out, So it's really interesting to see, how and anybody that's spoken to Fiona know that she's so loving and she's so sweet and she's so this and she was like, I surprised myself, you
Well,
know.
and she has a bit of a molten interior like I do. I mean, the first little book that she did in the entry-level class, it was called The Champagne Murders, and it had a huge dagger with blood dripping off it on the front page. So it's like this is how people find out what they didn't know about themselves. Like somebody who says, well, I don't write poetry. And then all of a sudden they're just writing poetry all the time. And they're like, well, how did I not know at the age of 62 that I love and write poetry? So creativity, particularly, I feel through writing, different to other genres, through writing particularly, has a way of showing you who perhaps you've been domesticated away from. And so that voice, level 4 is called the muses, and it's about getting in touch with these archetypal muses inside of us. And they're like, it's called disquietening muses, to use Jack's term. And it's about, well, and the book, The Muses, right? It's about creating with this energetic nature in men and women, and putting voice to these muses that have often been, you know, domesticated by society is a good way of putting it. I mean, I could put it much more harshly, but chained, by by societal norms. I don't know, but writing has the power to free us. That's the best statement I've ever said, and I've never said it before. But
Yeah.
writing has the power to free us as humans.
Yeah, it's so, like I'm listening to you and I'm going, I'm seeing this in me. Like right now, that I've in the past year, I've had a huge seeing. Like I've been seeing how I've been repressing my emotions. Like, and the emotion that seems to come out a lot is anger. But I think that anger comes out because I'm repressing sadness, or I'm repressing ingesting, or I'm repressing something, and eventually I get angry. Because I can't stand living in a box. I love that conversation that we had off camera, guys. We were talking. She said she was an outlier, and I was like, what the heck's an outlier? Because my first language is French. So she kind of like explained to me what an outlier was, and I was like, holy shit, I'm an outlier. you know and it's true. I don't like to live according to what my father says, what my mother says, what the government says, but yet I still do in many instances. But the more that I look, the more that I see, the more that I kind of like, I don't want to, I literally want to be free. For me, it's about being free. And most of the time, the places that I've seen that I'm not free is BB here. This girl here has been not, like, I'm the one holding on to it. I'm not being free because of me. Has nothing to do with anybody else outside. Although I thought,
How do you free yourself then?
well, kind of like I just become present to why, what's going on. Like I kind of like get present to what's going on. So I'm going to tell you a story. So my relationship with my father has not been the best relationship all my life, really. And of course, my father has what my father has, but for all my life, it was because of my father. All my life, it's because he's like this, it's because he's done this, it's because he's done that, it's because this, that, and the other. And I know for a fact that the more that I put the responsibility on somebody else, the more I'm stuck.
The more you're what?
I'm stuck.
Oh
The
yeah, yeah,
less I'm free. So
yeah.
if it's your fault, I can't do fuck all. Let's use the F word, Jules. Can't do fuck all with you. I can't force you to do anything. I can't. I, but if I take it on and then I go, okay, what is it? And then I just get present to what is going on here. So I started seeing, oh, I think this shouldn't happen. Actually, I think that most of my suffering has always been about this shouldn't be. My thought was this shouldn't be. And that, as the second that this shouldn't be, you're no longer present. Because if you were present, you'd say, oh, this is. Because this is. So now it's kind of like my father says something, I react to something. And then I'm like, well, this shouldn't be. And then I get stuck on, how could I change the shouldn't be? But most of the time, if it shouldn't be, then there's no hope. And if there's no hope, then I'm kind of fucked. And then I have to live with it. And I'm like, I don't want to live with it. And there I go. And it could go for on and on and on and on and on. Now I'm just kind of like, okay, why don't you just be present to what is? And there was a situation that happened with my father just recently. My father broke his ankle. My father's 82. He broke his ankle. He's already not mobile because in early 2000 he had a aorta rupture,
Wow.
and he survived through it. Like the doctor said, an angel came by, Mr. Debian, because they said, we can't believe that we saved you. Most people don't live through what you've lived through. But he stayed 6 months in the hospital,
Wow.
right? And from there, he had to do, the blood thing. What are they?
Transfusion?
transfusions. Like they had to do that. Not just transfusion, you know where they clean your blood and they bring it back in?
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah.
forget the name.
Yeah.
Anyways, so he had to go through that for a while. When he came in, he was 165 pounds, and when he got out, he was 107. So we can only imagine the trauma he's gone through there. And he doesn't want to go back to the hospital. He's like, I ain't going back to the hospital. I had a hysterectomy, an emergency hysterectomy, and I'm like, I'm not going back to the hospital. I'm not doing that. But that's just like, if I have to, I'll go. And same thing for him. He had to go and he went back. But here's what happened. I'm getting lost in the detail here. What happened was he needed help, and he had, fears, and had all of this. But what I had was, fuck, now he wants me to go fucking cook for him, and he wants me to fucking clean his house, and and I had this whole thing going on, right? But I wasn't listening to him. I wasn't, and because I was like that, he wasn't being nice to me. I'm being a bitch. He's going to be a bastard. You know what I mean? Like, we had this whole thing going on.
Get it.
So at one point, I said, okay, you're going to calm down. You're going to listen to him. You're not going to react, and you're just going to be present. And I went to see him, and he spoke, and I listened. And then I spoke, and he listened.
Mm.
And at one point, I said, you're the most important man in my life. And
Oh,
sometimes I feel you don't even love me.
oh,
And he said, that's not true. And in that moment, it was gone. Everything was gone because I was living in this bubble of how bad my father was. But if I just got present, it wasn't true. It wasn't true.
it wasn't true, and yet it could be true still, and
Yes,
that's what's
yes,
interesting. You and I have such similar stories around, the father, and I think mother, son, father, daughter, although, I
yeah,
don't know, but tricky dynamics. And, I would say the most challenging relationship in my life was with my dad. He passed in 2003, right when I started my spiritual psychology masters, actually. And, it was challenging. Like, fundamentally, I felt born as the wrong gender. And, what can you do? Like, if everything about you as a person is wrong, to the point that I would breathe too loudly sometimes, and he'd say, couldn't you breathe more quietly? It's like the patterning or the messaging that I wasn't even consciously taking on, or the thought process that I was engaging in, that I don't even know. If I tried to sort of write down what I was thinking about, I wouldn't even know. It's so unconscious. So much of everything is unconscious anyway. What we're only aware of, like, 5% of our conscious thoughts, and 95% are all operating in us. Bless our hearts.
yeah,
And then when he died, I didn't have kids, and so I could be at the hospital with him, and he was drowning, basically, because he got misdiagnosed. And anyway, so he died of medical malpractice. It was a tricky situation. But I didn't have young children, so I could stay in the hospital with him and try and teach him yoga breathing and hold his feet and have him breathe into his feet. We had this, beautiful exchange and everything. And then he died. And I had grief, more about that we were never going to become resolved now because he died, than actually the fact that he had died. I didn't have a great deal of sadness about the fact that he died, but that I would be permanently unresolved, or so I thought. And
yeah,
definitely the bite and the sting of feeling like the child of a man the daughter who wasn't loved by a man or seen, has softened. But I can't say I can't say that it doesn't. When I'm tired, and
yeah.
if I'm tired, I'm not when if I'm tired, and when I'm tired,
It
it's
easily comes back.
I easily feel that I'm not wanted, and there's a real tenderness around my heart about around that. And so what do? I write about it. you know, because I'm not the only person in the world who hasn't felt wanted by a parent.
Yeah.
You know, our parents, you know, there's so much material. And that's that, you know, I say in my classes a lot, you know, I write so that I write and I use my past so that my past isn't using me. And it's not that, you know, it's like, it's not that I'm walking around the world all wounded if I'm not writing, but I'm certainly not using it for art. And it sort of defragments the tension and the bite of my lived experiences if I'm using them creatively on the page. So people wrote to me after my suicide newsletter went out last week, which was kind of a bit of a tense moment for me. You know, was I going to risk that much? But I tell my students to be brave, right? So I mean, I had to fucking go for it. You,
Yeah.
you know,
Go.
you did say I could use the F word, so I'm going to
Yeah, go
drop
for
it in
it.
there. But I still felt tender and a bit embarrassed. And I still thought, well, you know, I wonder if people would stop, you know, taking classes with me. Or I wonder if people in my spiritual community are going to think, well, she's not that evolved if she's still talking about, you know, suicidal tendencies. Not that I have them now. And it wasn't about suicidal tendencies. It was about writing. Um, so I can't speak for other people. I can only speak for, you know, what my journey with my parents has been. And it's been fraught, both with my mum and my dad. But my goodness, I've got some great material. And what was it that Annie Lamott said? You know, if you don't want people to write about you, they should have treated you better. So I'm all about that. You know, it's like when you're writing, don't think I could never publish this. What if somebody saw it? Just give yourself the freedom of, and you mentioned freedom earlier, give yourself the freedom of just writing. You know, it's the greatest relationship. You
But what I'm also hearing is it's about giving ourselves the freedom to feel. Like I get that too, you know, how you said, oh, well, no, she's not that evolved, you know. Well, you know, I have that same conversation, you know, about me. Like I can't be angry. Well, no, I'm getting clearer and clearer with the fact that I'm freaking human and I make mistakes. I cry, I scream, I laugh, I I'm vulnerable. I'm, you know, like I get into my head. I, you know, I freak out. I make mistakes. I avoid paying bills. I, you know, like I do all of that. And if you're looking for a coach that is perfect, good luck. Good luck. You're not going to find one. I mean, that's the whole point is about navigating life and navigating, you know, all of these, you know, mountains and molehills that we create and that we go through. I think that's
Why
the,
would anybody want a coach that's all shiny and sunny sided up? You know, it's like if somebody doesn't know how to feel desperate, it's like when I got sober, you know, I've been sober now for like, I don't know, over 30 years. You know, I wanted to go to a therapist who was an addict. It's
yeah.
like, why would
They
I,
understood.
you know, who understands?
Yeah.
Why is it so wrong to feel terrible? And when you're feeling terrible, why do people want you to stop feeling terrible so quickly?
Yeah.
So I love that, you know, I love your willingness to say that you feel angry. And obviously, you're very consciously aware because you know what lies behind anger, sadness for sure.
Yeah.
But, you know, I can feel angry about the smallest thing if I'm tired.
Yeah.
So for me, managing my emotional landscape, and those people who know me know that I have, you know, like I'm a deep feeler, you know, I'm a very deep feeler. I think a lot of poets are. We're traumatized at the core level in a beautiful way, right? But so I feel everything, you know. I also have a Virgo moon for those who are interested, so that has something to do with it. But I feel everything, and I'm a Cancerian double. So I mean, with all of that, you know, of course I feel everything. Um, and sometimes it's like it feels awful to feel everything. In fact, I get kind of emotional just saying that. Sometimes it's really hard to feel everything so much. And other people don't, you know, they don't have a clue um
Yeah.
what it's like to be a, you know, like a feeling amoeba. But the point of that is writing is always there. So when it's all when it and and people who say, you know, just go with it, because now people know that if I ride into my feelings, which is like the case with everybody, if you go closer towards something and not away from it, it'll goes away quicker. But why do we want to not feel dreadful quicker? It's like, why is there this negative bias on negativity? You know,
Yeah.
it's bizarre, this whole negative bias thing, you know, that we are destined to feel badly more time than we are destined to feel good. Humans have a negative bias. It's as simple as that. We're programmed for discomfort as humans, and yet we do everything possible to stop each other feeling discomforted and try to make it just feel better. You'll feel better soon, you know. We medicate with food and sex and drugs and rock and roll or whatever, chocolate in my case. You know, we're trying to sort of stop ourselves feeling badly because somewhere along the line we were told that, you know, we shouldn't be feeling badly. You should feel angry. We should all feel angry with what's going on in the world right now, because
Yeah.
we're sad for the world, this beautiful world, you know. Of course we're going to feel angry, and that there needs to be space for that.
So it kind of like it's leading into something that you spoke about. I don't know if you spoke about it on camera or off, so I'm just gonna bring it in. Uh, you were talking about self-care.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think that self-care is misunderstood. You know, when I was telling you I was doing these social media things, you know, is like one of them is something like, if me not getting into an argument with you makes me a doormat, then so be it. You know, like I'm fucking happy with it. I just want, you know, I'm not going to get into arguments just because I want to be right, or you know, I'm just like, I want peace. So that's how I take care of myself.
Yeah, self-care, mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical. It has to be on all four levels. You can't just do one, because if you don't do all four, the one that you're doing will get pulled back into a stasis place again by the other three. So there's a model, right? There's a model: mental, emotional, spiritual, physical. Let's say spiritually, you start going to church a lot. Well, if you don't shift the mental, emotional, and physical over here, this will get pulled back. This is why people, you know, do their New Year's resolutions and nothing sticks, or people can win the lottery and then end up being broke. So it has to be mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical. And you know, I'm looking at my program, which is about to start up again next week, and I always get quite tired towards the end of the 8 weeks. And Joe, who works with me, is always just saying, you know, what do we need to do this session so you don't get quite so quiet, you know, quite so tired. And so what I've been pondering is, you know, what David White, the poet, talks about this, and I studied a couple of times the programs that he's done, and one was on conversational leadership. It was a 9-month program in Seattle, on Whidbey Island, and he talks about the three marriages. He has a book called The Three Marriages, and the three marriages are like three pieces of a pie, right? Thirds, and how you're married to your relationship, so your significant other or your family and friends. You're married to your work, whatever your job is that you do, and you're married to yourself, and that each three pieces of that pie have to have the same amount. You can't. So when I'm
Right.
teaching, you know, when I'm teaching, my marriage to my work is like you know, a quarter of my pie, if not more, you know, more than a quarter. And my piece of my pie, even though I practice radical self-care when I'm teaching, is quite thin. So I've been looking at, when I start teaching next week, how I can actually make the piece of my pie a third, if not a quarter, my self-care. And what would that look like on the four levels? And then what a better teacher I would be if I came to every class, you know, filled, instead of kind of running a little tired or ragged from all the classes I've done prior that week.
Well, I know how you could do it. I think that from now on, when you do a class, you have to have 1 hour conversation with me every week.
You know what? If you want to do that for the next 7 weeks, I'll do it, and I'll tell you what's happening, what's been going on, how I'm taking care of myself, because we teach through what we do.
Yeah.
And, you know, some people think it's really weird that I vacuum once a day, sometimes twice, and it's part of my self-care. Also, I've been talking to Maria, who I know that you chatted with. Thank you,
Yeah.
Maria, for introducing Jasmine and I. And we went away on a little writing retreat recently, and we were talking about, you know, self-care. And I was talking to her about how being in the writing studio, because I go somewhere else to write for my own products, and I teach from home. Now, some would say that's work. You know, I get up on my days off from teaching, and I go to my office and I work. But that writing that I'm doing, that work is not, it's self-care. It has a different quality to it. It's actually falls under spirituality in my self-care model in my 4 levels. And so I wonder how many other, how much else we think is actually work, but actually if we language it slightly differently, it could be under self-care.
Yeah.
Self-care is absolutely, I think, so I've told this before, but I'm going to say it again, that I was working with a guy in Silicon Valley as a coach once, and he wanted to talk to me about all these things in his business, his big business, Silicon Valley, big business, lots of
Yeah.
people working for him, that he could do differently. He had this problem and that problem, blah, blah. And I said, would you be willing to be a guinea pig? And I said, I just want to talk to you about self-care, because I knew, and this has got nothing to do with the 3 principles. This is just every spiritual modality,
Yeah.
that we've already got everything we need inside of us. We've got all the answers already. We're just not quiet enough to hear them. And so I said to him, let's work on self-care. Not because I think if you take care of yourself better, you're going to hear the answers. I wasn't going to go there with this chat, but I just wanted to sort of play around with it. Anyway, within about 6 weeks, we had his self-care so dialed down that every single issue at his company that he thought he was dealing with, he'd resolved it so quickly and so easily, because through self-care, guess what? New thought.
Yeah.
You can't create, I don't believe, well, that's not true, because
Yeah. But you can't. You
yeah,
can,
you
but well,
can,
I
because I've
understand.
totally done it.
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
walking up the hill about 2 years ago, and I first felt the dog was sick, I was sick, life's falling apart. Oh, by the way, I think I'm going to do this, this, and this with my classes. Okay, let me go back to feeling dreadful. So yes, insight can happen at any time, but it's much more likely to happen in like a carrot can grow in any kind of soil, but you're going to grow a better carrot if you've got good
Yeah.
soil. What I'm saying,
Yeah.
right?
I think that I totally get you. Like once you get quiet, you can hear, it's like you can hear truth more. Like you can make the difference between, oh no, that's shit and that's good kind of thing, you know? I think it becomes clearer for
But
us.
when you say to people, get quiet, people's immediate response is, well, I can't, you don't realize how busy I am. And
Yeah. Yeah.
until that mindset shifts and people are willing to be less of a victim to their life and more of a priority to themselves, nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
Nothing changes, you can't be a victim and expect things to change.
Jules, I think this is the perfect time to stop. Like this is like I told you we've already busted our time. I knew we would. Uh, I knew we would. But do you have anything before we hang up? Is there any like it's Jules Swales? What's your website?
.com.
JulesSwales.com. That
Yeah,
okay?
and if people want to read my newsletter, go sign up for it. It's, I don't inundate. It's every 2 weeks. And it's about me. I'm not telling you how to live your life better or what to do differently to be a better writer. I'm just trying to demonstrate being brave. And it's called Unmute Yourself, Be a Brave Writer. And I'm hoping that I'm showing how I'm being a brave writer or a brave human, let's say. So people could go to my website. It's under the contact page and sign up for that if they like.
Okay. And then you have any classes? I know you're pretty full most of the time, right? Your classes are usually
We're usually booked up 6 months, but I don't know when this is the recording's coming out. But we're about to start the April session, which will be next week, and then we finish. And then I've got my summer advanced classes, and then we start the whole session again, which includes the entry level, and that starts at the first week of September. So that will be a good time. But if people are interested, they can just email me, and we can have a phone chat, and I can chat with them.
yeah, see what's possible. Yeah, that's what I tell people, just reach out. Reach
Yeah,
out
reach
and
out.
ask. It's not because we're on a podcast that we're untouchable. No, we're actually very touchable. So you just have to reach out to us and we'll talk. Fantastic. Well, it was a treat to meet you, Jules. I'm happy I finally got to.
Me
So thank
too.
you for coming on. Maybe we'll have you again sometime.
I'm open.
So then I'm going to tell
You know what we should
everybody.
do? We should do it at the end of the 8 weeks. And then that way, I can talk about whether I was actually able to implement any of the self-care practices and how big my pie became. I'll
That
email you
sounds
that. I'll
good.
email you.
That sounds good. That sounds good. We're gonna have a follow-up interview, guys. So for now, I'm gonna say dream it, dare it, do it, live the life that you want, and we shall see you next episode. Have a good one. Bye.